Welcome to the Crimson Engine. My name is Rubidium. It is a balmy minus 16 degrees Celsius in Vermont today. But what I wanted to talk about was creating your own style in a way that permits you to make the films that you want to make. And I guess the title of this episode is going to be, There is no right way to make a film, only your way. We're going to look at a bunch of different famous, successful directors and how a lot of their techniques, their style, their way they do their work is often contradictory to one another. You'll see something that one director does is totally at odds with another director's way of working. And what I have taken from reading hundreds and hundreds of books about film, watching thousands of movies, listening to the old DVD commentaries, is that to tell the stories that they wanted to tell in the way that they wanted to tell them, these directors created their own style that allowed them to work in the way that they wanted to work, that allowed them to go back to work time and time again and refine, to create and sort of design their own world within the screen, within the reality of the movies that they're making, and within their own lives that allowed them to do that again and again. So we're going to look at directors from all different countries, directors from all different backgrounds, directors from all different eras and epochs of film. I want to start with the person that made me want to become a filmmaker, which is Akira Kurosawa. I was about 11, I think, 12, when I watched Seven Samurai. It was on television. It was on the SBS in Australia, which meant no ads. You got to see the whole thing. And I had seen Star Wars a bunch of times. I'd seen a lot of Western films, but this was a doorway into another world, and it took itself. It was clearly, even at a really young age, I appreciated how I guess artistic and expressive it was. And it was, one of the genre forming action movies. Like a lot of the things that we take for granted in modern action, like sympathetic weather, when a thunderstorm happens during the final battle, or the different tropes of action heroes, or like getting the gang together to perform a big heist or task. A lot of those can be traced back to Seven Samurai. And it was directed by Akira Kurosawa, one of Japan's, if not Japan's greatest filmmaker. He started off in propaganda films in World War II. I think he was even a spy plane operator because he worked with film. And afterwards, he got his first big breaks because he would not cut corners. He would have a script that everyone agreed, or the people who were greenlighting the movie agreed worked. And what would often happen at the time is they would take the script, and then on set, they wouldn't have the materials that they needed, wouldn't have the time, and they would cut corners. And so it was normal at the time for the movie that was delivered to sort of be not the script that was written, and it would lose a lot as a result. It would sort of be watered down. So Kurosawa became famous for obsessively shooting the script as it was shot, and delivering on what was good in the script ended up being what was good in the film. As he was kind of he did a couple of judo movies. He, at the time, Japan was definitely suffering from the post-war shortages. They didn't have a lot of film. They didn't have a lot of cameras. They didn't have a lot of money. And someone showed up for a job and was kind of given the runaround. His name is Toshiro Mifune. He went on to become an amazing actor, but at the time I think he was looking for a job as a stagehand or something, and he was sort of given the runaround and put in the wrong place. And Kurosawa, I think the story was Kurosawa was in a different room and heard someone shouting. And he went in and found Toshiro Mifune kind of like chewing out the stagehand, whoever it was, because he'd been waiting for hours and hours to get this job interview as a stagehand, and he'd been told to go there and then there. He just kind of finally exploded and was just so wonderfully expressive in his anger that Kurosawa was like, I need that guy. I want him. I want to cast him in my films. His reason at the time was that film was so short, in such short supply, that he wanted someone who could communicate an emotion or get the point across of the character quickly, because Japanese actors at the time were renowned for sort of being very internal, being very kind of suppressed in their and repressed in their emotion, that you have to, shoot for a very long time, waste a lot of film in order to get to the point. Whereas he wanted someone who was just cut through all that, was very brash and direct and blunt. And he saw that in Mifune, and he hired him. They wanted to become these, they created the Yojimbo trilogy together, did Seven Samurai together, and they both built each other's careers. We'll touch on this when we talk about Werner Herzog later and his collaboration, not with someone that he really liked, but with someone who is super interesting, someone who is super direct, and in Werner Herzog's case, someone who is kind of mentally ill, but he could handle him, like he could get something from him, and he felt like the drama that it produced made great cinema. So he was prepared to put up with all the difficulties of dealing with him in order to get what happened. This sort of angles into Redbeard, which was their last movie that they did together. Kurosawa, sort of had done a lot of films at this point, had great success, but also made films that had lost a lot of money. And so every time he had trouble raising money for the next film, which really annoyed him, since other movies of his were still making plenty of money for the producers. He didn't understand why they wouldn't take another chance on him, but he'd burnt them so many times. Now money was in short supply. So the example of this is Redbeard. It's a movie about starring Mifune as a doctor in medieval Japan. They built an entire medieval town, and aged it. They had people wear the kimonos and sleep in the beds for a year before principal photography. So everything would look worn, which is fine, right? It's great to build something if you're going to use it. But the town itself is only seen on screen in the background for less than a minute. The rest of it happens, in a soundstage or wherever they shot the main offices, and you only see the town in the background very briefly. They do use it when they destroy it for the earthquake scene, but it's hard to know whether this was kind of Kurosawa saying F you to the studio and making them build an entire set that he wasn't going to use. It did take 2 years to shoot the film, which is 600 shooting days, which, a Hollywood movie today will be shot in 60 days with the budgets they have. Back then this was still the 70s. And Mifune got really upset because he had to miss out on a lot of other movies because he was stuck shooting Redbeard. And Kurosawa had him dye his beard red, even though the movie's in black and white. And the rumor is that he missed out on Star Wars, that he was asked to be in Star Wars by George Lucas, who of course was hugely inspired by Kurosawa. And he had to turn it down because he was stuck shooting this long, protracted movie that, even over those 2 years, they didn't shoot the whole time. Kurosawa got sick, Mifune got sick, so they would delay and delay and delay, and the movie ended up costing far too much money, just as he had a reputation for, and it made far too little money, and it was sort of like the last big film of Kurosawa. I think he went on to do other films, but not with Mifune. He did. I'm guessing that Kurosawa, I'm guessing that George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola came on board and helped him make some of his later films. I think Memories and the King Lear adaptation, because they're both in color. It's nice to transition from Kurosawa, who was like obsessed and took a long time, to Clint Eastwood, an actor turned director that had made dozens of movies, won dozens of awards. He came at acting from a very different place. In fact, his character, or his persona that is Eastwood, took a lot from Sergio Leone's adaptations of Kurosawa's Yojimbo trilogy, which was the dollar trilogy in Sergio Leone's world. Eastwood took on the role of Mifune and adapted a lot of Mifune's characteristics. That's sort of like kind of the first action hero of like the tough guy who has kind of a dark sense of humor and is reluctant to use his powers, is very laconic with his wit. They were all hallmarks of Mifune's character that then Eastwood adopted in the unauthorized American adaptations, and then went on to create a career from. He was apparently infamous for, Eastwood was, of taking home the wardrobe from the movies that he was in and just wearing them as his clothes. So you would see him out and around, and Arnold Schwarzenegger says that when he first met Eastwood, he was wearing the jacket from Dirty Harry. He was too cheap to actually buy clothes for himself. And that's, Eastwood was born in the 30s. It's kind of like post or during the Great Depression. I think that frugality never really leaves you. And he had made a bunch of movies, become an action star. And then on a film, he and the director were both kind of courting the lead actress. She ended up, going to Eastwood, and the director got really annoyed and would kind of like torment her on set and make her do 50 takes of something. So Eastwood, as a producer of the film, just fired the director and took over as director, figuring how hard can it be, in a very Eastwood way. And there's now a DGA rule called the Eastwood rule, which specifically stops the lead actor taking over as director and getting credit for it. But Eastwood, in his, kind of take your wardrobe home and wear it, sort of decided that directing's not that hard. If you have a good script, the actors just have to show up and say their lines, and the film will turn out fine. He is infamous for doing just one take. He sort of figures that you're the actor brings what they're going to bring to the scene, brings their interpretation, and no amount of, the director getting in their head and asking, oh, think about this from, imagine your mother's over there. Or, he doesn't like that sort of Freudian or even like, theater directing, the very intense psychological directing. He really distrusts that because that wasn't his background as an actor. He sort of feels like the actor's job is to be who he is and say the lines that he's been asked to say. And once he's done that, what else is there to do? So it's a very different perspective from what you get from, like a David Fincher or, someone who's renowned for doing, or Stanley Kubrick, renowned for doing hundreds and hundreds of takes. And to be fair, you dig into those hundreds of takes, and it honestly, it's either insecurity or on the director's part, or sometimes they're doing it to punish the actor that they're disagreed with, or whatever it is. Eastwood has none of it. He sort of does one take, and on you go. Like, there are a lot of anecdotes of him showing, having had the crew rig out a bar for like 2 days, decorate it, light it, set the cameras up, him coming in with his cast, doing, a scene in 5 takes and leaving before lunch. Like, that style of his. And you watch his movies, Gran Torino especially, where he used non-actors as the Hmong kind of Detroiters. Their performances are pretty bad. I mean, they're hard to watch. He's in it, and the movie did really well, So I guess it proves his point that no one's showing up to see great performances by the supporting cast. They're showing up to see Clint Eastwood be Clint Eastwood. Protect his property, defend his family, seek justice. That's what men like to see at the cinema. If the focus groups are to be believed, he provides that. Another infamous one of him is the weird animatronic baby or CGI baby, whatever it was in American Sniper. Probably looked fake, and he's like, well, no amount of extra takes is going to make this look any less fake. Let's just do a take and move on. So I think Eastwood comes at it from a different place. He comes at it, you could say, from an actor's perspective, but usually actors like to perform. They like to do a lot of takes. Eastwood doesn't. He kind of comes at it from a star's perspective, I guess. Someone who, he never really, he loves cinema, but doesn't like, it's just not his personality to refine it. Honestly, I really respect the fact that he has found his way that he likes to work. He's still working, he's still making movies, as I talked about in a previous podcast. He's 80s and 90s. So honestly, obviously something works for him. Someone else that is an award-winning film director who came at it from an actor's, in this case, a comedian's perspective, is Takeshi Kitano. He's directed Sonatine, Hanabi, which won a ton of awards. Really means fireworks in Japanese. It's really very beautiful film. Actually, one of my favorites. He is seen as, in some ways, the kind of inheritor of Kurosawa's legacy. Is this renowned director who's also crossed over to the West and who Western audiences really enjoy their films as well. He says if he doesn't get what he wants from an actor, he just changes where the camera is. So he shoots them from behind, or he shoots them from the side where you can't see their eyes. If he feels like the performance isn't authentic, he just sort of covers it up. Like he just figures, well, this actor couldn't make this line work in a way that looks good on camera. We still need it to tell the story. So I'll just be on the other character's face when he says that line. So he's interesting though, because he was a comedian, but he was the straight man in sort of like a funny guy, straight guy comedy duo. And he was the one who just sort of sat there and listened to the other guy talk. It's an interesting choice for him to go on and be the star. But another one of his styles is just long, unbroken, still shots. So, like he might have people driving to a shootout, and then the shootout happens off screen and it cuts straight to, the protagonist covered in blood, looking at the dead bodies for like 60 seconds as we just kind of pan across the bodies and then look at his face. And then maybe his classic shot is of a shot from a person behind just looking out at the ocean. So again, he found a way to do action. He found a way to do drama. He found a way to do really emotional, beautiful films that don't involve sort of like the heart-rending emotion of an actor's performance. He did it mainly in the absence of that. Sort of like he sets up the story of these really heart-rending, tragic or crazy events, and then just lets you, the audience, project your emotion onto the blank slate of the actor's face. So it's different. It's interesting. I think when it works really, really well. He did a crossover using American actors, Omar Epps, I think, in Brother. It didn't work quite as well. Like, if you could tell that the American actors, at least I think the American actors, don't really get it or what they're supposed to be doing. The premise is a little, it's like a Japanese gangster that goes to America, to LA, little Tokyo, and kind of like takes over the Yakuza there. So it doesn't, it seems a little odd. I think one of my favorite ones of his is the blind swordsman ones of his. They're really set period piece in a samurai who is blind and has a cane, and he draws his sword out of his cane. Really touching. I think he also surrounds himself with fantastic actors who don't need a second take. And the fact that both Eastwood and Takeshi Kitano are known for using this technique, so actors come prepared. They know that they're going to get one shot at this, as opposed to, if you're shooting with David Fincher, you know that he's not going to use the first take. So why put anything behind the first take? Just using the first take puts everyone on notice and allows you to maybe cut through a lot of that time and expense of doing take after take, working the shot as you do, as David Fincher does. I think I've done a whole video on why David Fincher does thousands of takes. Both he and Francis Ford Coppola had this idea of refining the script as much as they can, then getting to set, doing takes, finding what's interesting, working it, making the interesting thing a larger part of the scene, exploring it, having the actor changing the lines. Francis Ford Coppola loves to rewrite the lines as he's shooting to try and get to the heart of the scene. And then they don't just go to it's good, they go until it's bad, meaning they do a take and a take and take until it starts to get worse, because their theory is that if you stop when it's good, maybe you stop 2 takes short of when it's absolutely great. And you won't, until it starts getting worse, you won't know until if the scene has actually peaked and got as good as it can be. Yeah, we spent, months building this set. It's all going to get torn down after this. Why don't we at least use the time that we've already paid for to get as much as we can? And I respect that as well. I think everyone's cleared their whole day. I think actors sometimes do feel put out when they're not able to, go use their full abilities or be pushed. That, if you're an actor, actors love acting. That's why they've given their life to this. If you have a whole day and you just do 1 take and go home, some people feel underutilized. So, both sides are true. But then you can also say, you do 150 takes, you've just been absolutely worn out and run dry. And how are you going to get out of bed and do it again tomorrow? It is tough. And yes, different actors have different strengths, but you're the director. If this is your film, you're creating this reality. It's up to you to find something that you like. Actors are paid to, bend themselves to your way of doing things. And they, want an experience of working with different directors in different ways. They get something from that as well. So I don't think a director should ever say, oh, well, this is actor A, he likes working this way. This is actor B, they like working this way. I think that you always need to make a strong choice that works for you, and then insist, as is your prerogative, to bring everyone else along in that way. And like I said in the title, there is no right way of directing a film. There's only your way. And the audience that comes to watch the film, they're coming to watch the film to see a story told from a perspective, your perspective as the director, not the writer's perspective, not the actor's perspective, not the producer's perspective, because the producer really shouldn't have one. They're just there to give you what you need to tell the story that you want to tell. It is a huge amount of power to really shape the perspective on the entire world, to sort of put the audience within your head. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate that or use that. They try and tell something very generic. I think this happens from television. Like television, you're really just a hired gun shown up to color by numbers and tell the story from the showrunner's perspective. Dick Wolf created Law and Order. There's been thousands and thousands of episodes of that procedural perspective. All the hundreds of directors that have come and gone in Law and Order have been there and only get paid if they are able to imitate the voice of Wolf, who put the whole thing together. They really just want carbon copies. So I think it can be really hard for TV directors to go into film and then be asked to bring their perspective to it. Another very interesting way of shooting movies is the Paul Greengrass, Catherine Bigelow way, as she showed in Hurt Locker. But it probably is more of a Greengrass perspective, which is the kind of documentary immediate way of shooting, where you have 5 cameras in an arc around your story, sometimes in a big circle, all on zoom lenses so they don't see each other. And you really getting the actors to almost improvise what's happening in the scene, as long as they, say their lines right. They don't have to hit marks. They don't have to be blocked, meaning told where to stand, when to move, when. They're really it's all just being captured in a single take. Now they do multiple takes because, they might improvise it this way, but they're shooting with multiple cameras so that takes don't have to match. They can change up the blocking. They can, go here, go there. This is the Bourne Supremacy, the Bourne movies. This is, like I said, Hurt Locker. Strangely enough, Woody Allen also used to work this way, where he would light the entire area and basically have the actors kind of like riff off each other and have complete freedom to change lines, sit down, stand up, like to keep people off balance, like to, do their own thing as far as comedy goes. But for the Greengrass perspective, I mean, I still think that scene, I think it's in Bourne Supremacy, where they're in the London train station and Bourne is giving the journalist the cue of where to go and who to. It's such an amazingly tense scene. It feels so real. Like if it was shot from a big action perspective, like let's say Steven Spielberg or shot it, it would be all very coordinated. It wouldn't feel real. Like Greengrass shoots in a way that feels like you're watching a documentary. You're sometimes out of focus. The camera is trying to find the actors as they're moving. The framing is very asymmetrical. We get this real urgency and immediacy that you can't really fake. It's happening because the camera operators are trying to find what's happening as we are and understand it. I think Hurt Locker is another really great example of. But I think Hurt Locker is interesting because it's all these little vignettes, like all these little encounters that the character has through his tour of defusing bombs and encountering enemy snipers and all these things. And for that reason, it feels even more sort of documentary. It's sort of a day in the life. I can't imagine shooting that way. You have so much trust in your, I guess, the operators, because you're not seeing. It's not as though Greengrass or Catherine Bigelow have a bank of 15 monitors where they're watching all these different cameras. They're just watching through maybe a camera, I don't know, or probably just watching what's happening on set, giving the actors direction, even giving the actors direction while the cameras are rolling to kind of keep things moving. And you're sort of these rolling retakes where you're constantly changing things up, and it cuts into something that, because you have so many angles, the action cuts great. It's all cuts seamlessly because you're not going from different takes, and it becomes really grounded in a sort of sense of its own reality. Another director that works with multiple cameras now, and is sort of definitely not an actor's director, is Ridley Scott. He now works with 7 or 8 cameras. His big thing was, and his background was the art department. So he wants to create a world that is immersive, these rich, beautifully designed, huge sets where lend themselves to these kind of epic stories. For instance, in Blade Runner and in Black Rain, they used the Ennis House in LA, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and because of earthquakes, has sort of not really been lived in for the last 50 years, meaning it's damaged and cracked from earthquakes. So I don't think people live there. I've been there a couple of times. It's a beautiful house. But, there's a very different statement from the director. If you set up someone's office for just being a dingy little corporate office with low popcorn ceilings, and a desk, but if someone's office is the living room of the Ennis house, you're dealing with a whole different perspective. The audience brings an entire different attitude to that scene. If you have smoke and fans and crazy lights, it doesn't matter as much how the actors say their lines, because you have created this epic, mythic setting for your story, and as a result, that is what the audience is going to take away. So Ridley Scott works really deeply with the art department to look at Blade Runner, look at any of his Alien films. The sets are always front and center. The world, it takes us into this world. He spends the time, he spends the money, develops this world, and then the actors sort of exist within it. On The Martian, like you said, he'll do 1 or 2 takes most, but he'll capture it all at once. The same with American Gangster. You have these very evocative, beautifully designed environments, and they're constantly changing. You have this. I think American Gangster had over 100 speaking roles. So all these different characters coming in at all these different locations, it gives this amazing sense of scale and scope of the world that we're dealing with, like 1970s New York or Harlem and Vietnam and, all these places. He really created, it pulls you in a way that a lesser director wouldn't be able to do. And Ridley Scott works with the best actors. He puts the greatest actors he can find. He gets to work with, the Matt Damons, the Ridley Scott, the Denzel Washingtons, the whoever it is. His theory is sort of, if I build the entire Coliseum and fill it full of thousands of people, whoever I put in the Coliseum is going to seem amazing. And if you get lucky and you get Russell Crowe, they rise to the occasion. You get the movie like Gladiator. Yes, Gladiator 2, I haven't watched it yet. I'm excited to now that it's on streaming. Probably not at the same league, but there's Denzel Washington. There's, new actors. So as I was a up-and-coming filmmaker, as I was in my 20s, I looked at these different directors, read everything that I could, and wanted to emulate this person in this way, this person in this way. And it's difficult when you're starting out because you don't have the budgets to create the amazing sets like Ridley Scott. You don't have the ability to work with, the best actors. You don't have the ability to do, a 300, 400 day shooting schedule like Fincher or Kurosawa or John Woo. You only have what you have, and you have to make your mark. But these guys started that same way as well. They all started somewhere, and they arrived at the way that they liked to work by being able to, explore things. No one starts filmmaking knowing exactly how they like to work. They get there over time with successes, with failures. They get there by designing both the life they want to live and the films that they want to make and the things that work for them. Because, if you say, I'm probably in my 20s, I said to myself, I'm probably not going to make films that I want to make. I'm not going to make the films that I'm dreaming of making until my 40s. So if that's the case, I need to develop and explore and try different things to see what works for me. I'm not going to, I'm unlikely to, hit it big in my 20s. I'm going to create a life that I want to live so I can do this for decades, not just for years. So I've arrived at something that works for me. one of the things that I like to do is always be shooting even small little, one scene films that I write in a day, because it gives me a chance to meet new people, try new things, work in new ways. And often I'll use almost all of the people that I worked with on my features, I met and worked with on those small little films and had a connection with. I liked the way that they worked. I liked the way that we collaborated. And so if you're always just refining a script, hoping to get it made, you miss out on the chance to actually get better and better at the craft of film directing and develop your style, develop your way of working. I'm going to leave it there today. Thank you very much for listening to this. I hope it has helped you and inspired you and made you realize that there is no right way to make a film. There's the way that you want to make a film. And what's wonderful about film is that it shares your perspective with the world. But to do that, you have to have a perspective. You have to have a way of doing things that works for you. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.